Uh, so, yeah, I've been continuing to work on the writing I've been doing on the Anapanasati Sutta, the discourse on mindfulness of breathing. Today, writing about, or trying to write about, trying to understand the step that is the fading away of desire or dispassion. It's quite an interesting topic to try to talk about. Certainly one that's relevant to recovery, and this writing I'm not focusing it on recovery. It's more writing on a sort of a general, Buddhist audience, for a general Buddhist audience. But at times, addiction is the perfect way to frame certain ideas. So I find myself falling back on that at times. For those of us who have been lucky enough to have our addictive craving fade, it is quite interesting. And that it, first of all, just that it happens, and I guess, and sort of how it happens, which is sort of more the question. But in the larger Buddhist scheme, this is a very advanced stage in which, not just addictive craving, but craving of all forms is said to fade and eventually to cease. And it's challenging to write about it because it's not, really a real thing for me, that all my cravings have faded away. But certainly there are times, especially on retreats, where you kind of are sitting and for a while, days and days, and everything just chills out, and that sense of needing something just sort of disappears. So it's not completely unfamiliar. I think probably many of you have experienced that. Many of you have been on retreats. So all of that seems like plenty to say before we start to meditate. Although it is, I'll say one more thing, that it is something that we can kind of notice in our sittings, because there is such a tendency to kind of notice the difficulties when we're meditating, all the things that are invading the mind or, agitating you, whether physically, mentally, emotionally. But, this teaching sort of says, notice when things do get quiet. Notice when there are moments of release, and get familiar with that and appreciate that. All right, with that, let us begin our formal period of meditation, which, if you are new, this is about 20 minutes that we meditate for. So settling into your meditation posture and to sitting in a way that's supportive of your awareness, supportive of clarity, supportive of relaxation, that you're comfortable enough to just settle. And letting the attention move through the body, just releasing any areas of tension, relaxing the jaw, shoulders, softening the belly. And feeling the body as an object, feeling the weight of the body, contact with your chair or cushion. Where are there particularly clear sensations you feel? What are the areas of the body kind of stand out? And where can you not feel the body so much? Sometimes we'll realize that there are areas of the body that doesn't seem to be much or any sensation. Maybe it's just areas of the body that we don't ordinarily pay attention to. So there's this kind of remembering that we're in a body, coming out of our head, sense of being connected to the earth, to the material world, not just the mental world. And then notice on the more subtle level, the feeling level, what's going on. This can be kind of tuning into the mood or emotional state, or in the language of the early Buddhist teachings, Vedana, just the pleasant or unpleasant, or just neutral experience of the body and mind. Do you have a generally pleasant or generally unpleasant, or neither one? Just kind of feeling is there for you right now. This word feeling, feelings, can have different meanings. It can just mean a physical sensation, or it can mean an emotion. And Vedana is not quite a full-blown emotion. Just that initial of overriding quality. Do you like it or not like it? Do you don't care? Do you not care? that initial quality that's really seen as the first impact from any experience, mental or physical. It's what then conditions are moving into a desire or fantasy or resentment, anger. We hear an unpleasant noise from the neighbor, and then that unpleasant state triggers anger at the neighbor. But it all started with just that unpleasant Vedana. We have a moment of peace from meditating, and it feels pleasant. And we think, I really should meditate more. How can I get this feeling more? So we've gone from the pleasant right into wanting more, wanting to hold on. So if we can see the Vedana, just whether things are pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, we can interrupt the arising of these more problematic states, these states that lead to dukkha, to suffering. Well, let yourself connect with the breath, feeling the breath at the nostrils or at the belly, breathing with your experience, breathing with sensation, breathing with feelings, breathing with thoughts or emotions. As we breathe with feelings, with thoughts, with the body. We'll naturally find that the mind wanders and we'll lose touch with the breath. When that moment when we realize the mind has wandered, we acknowledge that and come back to the breath. This is really the critical moment in meditation, that moment of waking up. We can make the mistake in that moment of judging ourselves or becoming frustrated with our practice, taking the fact that the mind has wandered as some negative thing that we should berate ourselves for. Meditation isn't a competition. One doesn't get graded on meditation. Good and bad don't really apply. As much as we can step out of that formula will help and ease our practice. What's useful is to notice, how did that feel when I noticed I was thinking? How did that feel when I stopped thinking, went back to the breath? Without turning it into a story, we can even just glance at what brought those thoughts up. Very often we'll know intuitively what's behind the thoughts. Oh, yes, I'm worried about this, or I'm excited about that. Okay. So seeing and understanding causality can help us to let go. It's not analysis, really, just seeing, just understanding. Yes, this is how the mind works. Yes, my mind works just the way every other mind does. Pursues pleasure, pushes away discomfort. Nothing special, nothing unique. No self behind it. All right. Well, I don't usually start talking about Vedana in my meditation instruction. I hope that wasn't confusing. Um, but I was thinking about it's one of the four foundations of mindfulness, and I had just heard from 10% Happier this week asking me if I wanted to talk to them next month. They're doing a series on the four foundations of mindfulness, and I told them I wasn't available, but it got me thinking about how confusing the four foundations of mindfulness are, really. When people talk about mindfulness, they usually think about the breath or the body or their thoughts or their emotions. And the four foundations of mindfulness, first one is body, but the second one is Vedana, which is not something that, it's hard to even explain what it is, much less practice awareness of it. And then the third one is mind states rather than thoughts. And then fourth one is dhammas, which is like being aware of several different sort of lists in Buddhism. So the traditional teaching really isn't much like what people typically understand to be mindfulness. I'm kind of tempted to tell them to ask that question of the people that they interview. So that is not the topic for this evening. I've been going through my book, Burning Desire, which, the subtitle is Dharma God and the Path of Recovery. So it's about using the Buddhist teachings in place of God in the 12 steps, basically. And it's not actually a subject that I think about much anymore. I wrote this book, it was published in 2010. So I wrote it a couple of years before that. So, but it's interesting to return to it as a primary topic. And so we've gone through the way the book is structured is that after the introduction, I go through a bunch of different things that I call higher powers that are different aspects of Buddhism, higher power of karma, of mindfulness, of wisdom, and we just finished love. And so the next one is the higher power of the Eightfold Path. So I think I should kind of frame that a little bit because the Eightfold Path is part of the Four Noble Truths. So, this is if you are going to try to learn any Buddhist lists, try to learn the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. So much comes out of these, and so much is based in them. I was up at the Abhayagiri Monastery recently, and to see Ajahn Sumedho and to just visit and see the monks. And Ajahn Sumedho referenced how for them and from their teacher Ajahn Chah, was this really legendary Thai forest master of the 20th century, how he kept coming back to the Four Noble Truths in his teaching. And I'm comforted by that because I do that as well. And I don't do it because Ajahn Chah did it. I do it because it's a topic that just draws me back all the time. And it's so integral to our understanding of Dharma and recovery. It's so much tied in and so such a helpful guide with addiction. So the Four Noble Truths, and there are many formulations of this, and there are many layers to understand of them. But in simplest terms, there's the truth of suffering, and then there's the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of the end of suffering, and the truth of the way to the end of suffering. And the Eightfold Path is the way to the end of suffering. Therefore, it is the fourth noble truth. So that is, in and of itself, kind of an interesting idea, because the first aspect of the Eightfold Path asks us, right view is to see things through the lens of the Four Noble Truths. So there's this kind of cycling back. There's this way in which the Four Noble Truths are kind of brought up as, that's, you get to the fourth truth, and then you're back in them in a way, and so they contain each other. The four truths contain the Eightfold Path, and the Eightfold Path contains the four truths. This is one of the ways that Bhikkhu Bodhi, was one of the great scholars on this topic, describes it, that they're kind of interwoven in this way. He says that the Four Noble Truths are kind of the, I can't remember the term he used, but sort of the dogma, or the kind of the framework of the teaching, and then the Eightfold Path is like the practical application of it. So what's really important for us to understand as addicts is that the second noble truth says that it's craving that causes suffering, right? So that's addiction, right? That's where the most direct line can be drawn between the idea of addiction and Buddhism, right here, that the cause of suffering is our craving, and the cause of addiction is craving. So you can point to many other causes, but that's kind of a core cause, right? So the Eightfold Path is the way to the end of suffering. The end of suffering is the end of addiction. Therefore, the Eightfold Path is the way to the end of addiction, which is, again, why I recommend that you actually try to learn that list and come to understand it. Because if you're trying to apply Buddhist principles to your recovery, this is how it's done. There's more than just the Eightfold Path. I mean, we just covered love and the Brahma Viharas, so that's certainly important as well. But the Eightfold Path is the nuts and bolts of the process, and it has three elements to it, which again are just so relevant to recovery, because the foundation element of the Eightfold Path is sila, or morality, or ethical behavior, doing the next right thing, non-harming, those basic kind of principles and precepts by which we live, which is a foundation of recovery. To recover from addiction by just stopping doing your addictive behavior doesn't really work. There's more that we have to stop. The typical, not that everyone is like this, but the typical addict also, besides having addictive behavior, does selfish things, does harmful things, maybe lies or cheats, or and cheats, on their partner, and acts out sexually, and all the ways that we act unskillfully. And this is one of the reasons why not using intoxicants is one of the precepts that are recommended for Buddhists, because when you use intoxicants, you tend to do these destructive and selfish things. Um, Obviously, when we're intoxicated, when we're drunk, especially, we tend to do things that we wouldn't do ordinarily. So without that as a foundation, recovery is not possible. And in Buddhist terms, awakening or the end of suffering isn't possible without that as a foundation, without morality and ethical behavior. And building on that, then there's the mental training, which is the meditative part of the path. And that's the part that's most known, and it's the part that's sort of celebrated, I think, the most, and particularly in the West with Buddhism, learning to meditate, going on a retreat, learning mindfulness. And it's the if the ethical behavior is the sort of material foundation, then the mindfulness is the mental foundation. In the Eightfold Path, there are three elements that have to do with meditation. There's mindfulness, effort, and concentration. And they're really interwoven. They're not really separate things. I mean, we could say the same of all 8 elements of the Eightfold Path, that they're not separate from each other. They don't operate independently. Mindfulness, though, cultivates this quality of observing that without which there's very little potential for change or growth. I would argue, and I have argued, that the very awareness that we have a problem, that we are addicts, that, as it says in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the moment of clarity is a moment of mindfulness. So mindfulness allows us to look inward and see what's going on with our mind in an objective way, to see our thoughts, to see the connections between our thoughts and our feelings, to see the connections between our actions and our feelings, between our thoughts and our actions, to see all these conditioned, interrelated elements and how they create our life, how they create our mind, how they create our beliefs. And so mindfulness, in some ways, is a kind of deconstruction of the self, to see what really makes us up. What are we made up of? What am I believing and why do I believe it? What am I feeling and why am I feeling it? What am I thinking and why am I thinking it? How do these things all interact? Why does my life unfold the way it does? To see that the mind, as Dhammapada says, that the mind comes before everything. The mind is the forerunner of all things. To see that the life that we're living is a creation of our own mind, and that in order to change the life that we're living, we have to change the mind. And concentration is the tool it's the muscle in there with that gives power to the mindfulness. Concentration is what allows us to calm the mind, to deepen the stillness and the peace, which allows the mindfulness to become more and more clear, sharper, more powerful. Effort is the energy involved in engaging in this process and sustaining this process. And effort always has to be in balance. Too much effort creates stress. Not enough effort is passivity. And so that effort is helping us to maintain a kind of consistency in this process of being mindful and maintaining concentration. So so we have this foundation of morality, then the developing of the mind and the clarity of mindfulness, which then open to what I call the wisdom aspects of the path, which are right view and right intention. Right view, as I said, is seeing the Four Noble Truths. And it's more than seeing them. It's realizing that they are constantly operating, that suffering is either being created or it's being ended, that we are either moving towards suffering or away from suffering. And that the entire world, what we see in this world, is built out of craving. The world, as Ajahn Sumedho says, we live in a desire realm. Humans decided that it wasn't enough to just be hunters and gatherers. They wanted more. And each step in human evolution, or in the, not evolution, but in the arising of human civilization, comes out of desire, comes out of craving. Which doesn't make it bad, but it does create underlying problems that keep arising, right, in human experience. So when we have this framework of the Four Noble Truths, we can see why the world is the way it is. And we can see why people do the things they do. They do things either because they're craving or because there isn't craving. When I say craving, I mean wanting or not want, or aversion, desire and aversion, which are just flip sides of the same thing. Desire is wanting something. Aversion is wanting to not have that, we could say. So we can see social relations, family relations through this lens, human relationships. We can see politics through this lens. We can see all of human behavior through this lens, which is freeing, because I think when we don't understand, it's confusing. Why do people do the things that we do? Why is the world the way it is? And it's pretty simple when we understand it through this lens. And then, of course, for ourselves, when we notice, oh, I am suffering. Well, if I am suffering, by definition, there is some kind of craving or aversion going on, some kind of clinging. What is it? Where am I clinging? And this isn't always easy to see. And even when we do see it, doesn't mean we can immediately let go, because honestly, I think most of our craving is happening on this subtle emotional level. I mean, we all have our cravings for, whether it's, for an object or some particular kind of pleasure in a particular moment. But the things that really get their hooks in us are more subtle than that a lot of the time, and not easy to let go of, which is why, I mean, well, not entirely why, but it's tied in with why when you recover from your addiction, it doesn't mean the end of suffering, right? Because all those subtle forms of cravings may still exist for you, that show up as opinions, as wanting to control people, as you don't want to do this and your partner does want to do this. And anyway, have to get on a plane and fly to Ireland, and that really sucks. I hate planes, but I want to go to Ireland, so that's craving and aversion at the same time. Sorry, got personal there. So the other aspect of right view is seeing cause and effect, how it operates in the world, which we can see when we look at the Four Noble Truths, that's what this Four Noble Truths are about. They're about how cause and effect, the causes of suffering and the ends of suffering. But that takes us out of the realm of magical thinking. I will say that's a critical piece of that. And then right intention, the other wisdom aspect of the Eightfold Path. It's interesting that right intention is a mental quality. Intention is a mental factor. But we see that it's really the interface between mind and body. It is the thing that connects our thoughts with our actions. So our intention is critical because it's what winds up, in Buddhist terms, it's the thing that winds up, that's really behind the results of the actions. So it's tied in with karma, with cause and effect. So one of the sort of unique ideas and statements of the Buddha is that our karma is intention, he said. And what I think I can safely say what he meant by that is that karmic results are informed by the intention behind the actions. So this means that it's not enough to do the right thing. You have to do the right thing for the right reasons, which is doubly challenging, right? Because you can look good, but if behind that is greed or selfishness or some kind of resentment, it's not going to really result in it's not going to flower in a positive way. So the Buddha said there are three kinds of intention that are right intention. One is the intention to let go, non-clinging. Why? That, of course, that's an intention because the cause of suffering is clinging. So yeah, okay, good. Let go of craving, let go of clinging. Another is essentially loving kindness, acting out of loving kindness, out of kindness, and all the forms of kindness, right? Generosity, for instance. And the other is compassion, caring about suffering, acting out of concern for people's suffering. So can you imagine if every action, and even in fact, every thought you had was driven by either letting go, kindness, or compassion? Yeah, that'd be pretty good. I think your mind, I think, would be very peaceful. But clearly, we're deeply conditioned, and so our conditioning often, very often, drives us and pushes us into thoughts, words, and actions that don't come out of right intention. And this is the great work of this practice, of these Dharma teachings. And again, it's pointing towards the same thing as recovery, because it's pointing towards spiritual awakening. And clearly these three forms of intention are right in there with what the 12 steps are trying to motivate us to do. The 12 steps are about letting go, first of all, letting go of our addiction. And then when we do our inventory, we're looking at all our resentments. Well, if we're looking at our resentments and in the steps 6 and 7, trying to let go of them, we're trying to get to a place where we are loving and compassionate. And then, of course, step 12, the carrying the message, is an act of compassion. So, you could bring in other steps, including the amends, to that formulation, but we can see that these intentions are in perfect harmony with recovery and with the steps, and beautifully, and give us a beautiful framework to try to live from. And I'll say that when we say compassion, we're saying compassion for all beings. That includes ourselves. And one of the first things we have to do with these intentions is let go of being non-compassionate toward ourselves, which means we have to forgive ourselves for all the times when we don't let go and when we aren't compassionate and when we aren't loving. So it's fortunately, I think, the 12 steps have kind of a fail-safe built in that way, that if you go too far down, I'm supposed to be this way, I'm supposed to be more loving, I'm supposed to let go, I'm clinging, what's wrong with me? There's a sign that goes, wrong way. You're going the wrong, so you're on the wrong street right now. There's go down to Compassion Road, please. Self-compassion, and one of the streets that runs off Compassion Highway is Self-Compassion Road. Let's say. Forgive me for the terrible metaphors. So this Eightfold Path is a beautiful one, and as I claim in this book, it's also a powerful one because it's the way to the end of suffering. What could be more powerful than that? There are no bombs that are more powerful than that, than the way to the end of suffering. Yeah. So that's I think I will be. As I said, I have one more session before I take the month off. Didn't really think about it that way, but yeah, I'm sort of going on holiday. I'm going to teach when I'm in Ireland and in England a little bit, a couple of day longs. But I will probably continue on with the Eightfold Path and maybe try to draw the more direct connections to the idea of higher power and turning it over. But for now, I first want to thank Angela for kindly recording and also putting in all the information in the chat. If any of you do plan on being in London, England, on July 30th, I will be teaching a day-long retreat. So that's on my website. So, and it's not too late to get a flight over, but and Angela also puts in information about how to give me dana. So if you would like to make an offering for tonight, you can do that through that system. But a few minutes left for people to chime in if they know. Oh, what's it say? Please note. Oh, next Friday. Right. Thank you, Angela, for putting that in. Next Friday will be the Spirit Rock version of this class, which will be on the Spirit Rock Zoom. And Walt Opie will be teaching that night for us, as he is authorized to teach at Spirit Rock. So as I said, a few minutes left, if anybody wants to chime in and say anything, share anything, ask anything.
I'll ask a question if that's okay. So I'm working through the 12 steps right now, and it seems like that could also be a path to the end of suffering, hopefully. Another way of thinking about it, I suppose. So, and I'm reading your book, One Breath at a Time right now. I'm on step 4 specifically at the moment. I was wondering if you could just briefly mention how the Eightfold Path and the 12 AA steps supplement each other, I guess, particularly with regard to the fourth step. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's probably a lot that could be said about that, but I think what first comes to mind is the connection between, well, a couple things. For one, any kind of inventory requires a kind of, we say rigorous honesty, and mindfulness is a kind of, honesty, like an internal honesty. I think I call it existential honesty at some point in that book. So there's that connection, that in order to really look deeply and honestly, we need mindfulness. And then there are models for inventory that we can use from, for instance, the 5 precepts. So looking at the thing, there's killing, but hopefully you haven't done that. But, just physical harm of others, the taking other people's possessions, or, using other people, harming people sexually, lying. Those are the first 4 precepts. The last is not using intoxicants, but that's a pretty good framework for an inventory. And it's one that, Buddhist monks do a kind of inventory. They have a monthly ritual in which they kind of confess any precepts that they broke in that month. So yeah, the precepts, which are right action, and right speech, and right livelihood, especially if your livelihood was something criminal or harmful, that those are connections to inventory. But I also think of meditation itself as a kind of real-time inventory. It's maybe more of a 10th step. But when we're meditating, we're kind of watching what's coming. We are watching what's coming through the mind, and that's very informative. It's very revealing in a way that maybe just writing an inventory about your past misdeeds or even your resentments isn't quite the same thing. There's something, you kind of catch yourself in real time when you're meditating. Oh, right. Oh, right. I do. Oh, yeah, I do think that. Oh, there's really a kind of honesty that can come up that might be missed in a more formal attempt at writing about ourselves. So those are some connections.
Thank you.
Okay.
Congratulations on 25 years of no divorce. Hopefully you'll get to 26 years of no divorce.
Very possible. 25 years, I'm trying to, it's there's the silver anniversary. Anybody know? I need to look that up, because I was thinking maybe a present would be the right thing, maybe a silver present. Yeah, maybe, yeah. I've still got one more day to shop. So, yeah, we got married at the Brazilian building in Tilden Park, which is normally booked a year and a half in advance. And my wife happened to stop in there on her way home from work. And they said, oh, we have an opening that on July 3rd. And this was like February or March of 1997. And she's like, okay, we'll take that, which is sort of a funny day to get married on July 3rd. But it was also good because the next day was a holiday, so people could come and everything. And then it was kind of like, yeah, we got married. And then there were all these explosions and fireworks afterwards, it was wild. I don't know what happened. but we flew to Cape Cod the next day, and then we did see fireworks. So, but it was pretty sweet. Although there were some problems, there were some certain resentments from that day that will not be shared at this time. But they're not my resentments. I'll just say that I was very happy. So I guess we ought to go. I know I'm like anybody else. Rosemary went for a walk, so I'm free to hang out if anybody wants to say anything else.
Hi, Kevin. It's Angela. I'll say something really quick.
All right.
Just because, yeah, the meditation this evening was really nice, and I appreciate
Nice.
Yeah, like it was like, which for me, I've been sharing with you that I don't often have like enjoyable experiences when I meditate. So, but
why do you do it then? God.
I mean, I'm looking at, a few different reasons why that might be happening, but I don't even remember now if you said this. I think it was during the meditation, but just like breathing with the present moment. Like, I don't even know what you were saying, but it just the way you were
breathing with the feeling.
Yeah, breathing with the feeling. You said a few different things, and then it was just like, breathing, just being with the present moment, and because I think that's what I mean, there were so many things that were really helpful tonight to kind of review and think about. And but yeah, just kind of like simplifying a little bit for myself, because I know that a big reason why, it's often not like there's so much struggle because I'm putting pressure on myself, or there's intention there to kind of fix, myself. Like I show up here because I'm not okay and I need help, and like all these things. Like that's why I went to recover, even after not drinking for 5 years, right? Like I walked into AA because it was like, okay, I guess I need something. And then come to meditation, and like find your teachings. And now, years later, it's like, oh yeah, like starting to relax a little bit with the practice and like not, put so much pressure on myself. But I think, so that kind of instruction of just breathing with the feelings and kind of being reminded of the Vedana aspect to my experience, I guess, also during meditation. So I guess I just wanted to say that and share.
I mean, I think I understand what you're saying. And certainly I'm familiar with having unpleasant meditation experiences. And there's always this balance between trying to make something happen in your practice, making an effort to be present and let go on the one hand, and then not trying too hard or like trying to suppress or control the experience on the other hand, and turn it into this struggle. Because that, of course, that's just more of the same. It's more of what I'm trying to get rid of. is that sort of, for me, it's like, I sit down to meditate, and oftentimes there's just this tension, and it's physical and it's kind of mental too. And maybe there's some particular concern, but a lot of times it just feels like energy that is Vedana or emotion or feeling, whatever you call it, that's just kind of there. And so going straight at it to get rid of it doesn't really work. So there's this way in which we kind of take this, I was writing about this today, I used the term oblique, that there's kind of a way in which we kind of come at our practice obliquely, rather than going, oh, I'm going to go at this tension and this discomfort, I'm going to suppress it. Rather, in some sense, I'm just sort of like letting it be there and trying to be with the breath. I'm just doing something else. I'm not ignoring it exactly, but I'm saying that's really not going to be, I'm not going to get into a fight with you. I'm just going to do this other thing. But what sort of then seems to happen, and that then for me kind of completes the practice, is that then the feeling kind of gets brought in with the breath. So that rather than I'm going at the feeling, I'm more inviting the feeling into this thing I'm doing, which is kind of neutral. I'm saying I'm just with the breath. Oh, and it happens that there's this feeling. Well, you can join in. I can breathe. So I'm breathing with the feeling, and so there's this kind of two things going on. So I'm not just, oh, there's just this feeling. I've got my breath going, which is kind of neutral and can be pleasant. And that relationship with the breath, what it helps me do is to sort of soften around everything. It's like it softens all the edges of it, so that when I bring the feeling in, the tension or the discomfort in, it's being held in this kind of slightly larger context, which is impersonal, that it doesn't have a story around it or a judgment around it or a conflict around it. There isn't a like, oh, I've got to do something about this, I've got to suppress it. It's being held, and it's kind of like, yeah, I'm not loving this, but it's kind of okay. Let me just keep with it. And that, gentle kind of holding of it has this natural, gradual impact that typically after 10, 15, 20 minutes, there's a subtle transformation that happens, and it just stops being the problem it was at the beginning. It just starts to cool off, just starts to diffuse. But it's not by going straight at it or by trying to, I have to really stay out of this argument with the feelings, or judgment of the feelings, and somehow let them be there, but without having this story around them. So, and that's why I say I kind of don't go straight at them. I start just to be with the breath, and then bring the feelings in. That's just one sort of way of trying to describe kind of a process. Yeah. Always a tricky thing, it just is, as the mind is, it's very deceptive, and our habitual way of viewing ourselves and of viewing our thoughts and viewing our feelings is very often counterproductive. And so we have to learn this new relationship to ourselves. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I've been ending with just sort of a suggestion for practice. So I'm gonna say two things now. One is this: try in the coming days practicing breathing with your feelings, seeing if you can do those two things together. But also, I'm going to give you the homework of learn what the Four Noble Truths are. You can Google them, whatever, but write them down in your own words and think about them, so that you for yourself really internalize what the Four Noble Truths are. And you're free to do that or not do it. So, blessings. Happy Interdependence Day on Monday, as the Buddhists say. And God bless America. It needs
Thanks, Kevin.
it very badly.